All right, good afternoon. In a short while, we will have our guest, Rabab Fatima, the High Representative for Least Developed Countries, Landlocked Developing Countries, and Small Island Developing States. She will be here to brief you on the third UN Conference on Landlocked Developing Countries, which is being held in Kigali in Rwanda in June of this year. Let me now turn to the situation in the Middle East and UNRWA and all the stuff you've heard about this morning. The Secretary General, in consultation with Philippe Lazzarini, the UNRWA Commissioner General, this morning appointed an independent review group to assess whether the agency is doing everything within its power to ensure neutrality and to respond to the allegations of serious breaches that have been made. The review will be led by Catherine Colonna, the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of France, and she will work with three research organizations: the Raoul Wallenberg Institute of Sweden, the Christian Michelsen Institute in Norway, and the Danish Institute for Human Rights. The review group will begin its work on February 14th and is expected to submit an interim report to the Secretary General by late March, with a final report expected to be completed by late April. The final report will be made public. The review is in response to a request made by Philippe Lazzarini earlier this year in January. The review group's terms of reference are, one, to identify the mechanisms and procedures that the agency currently has in place to ensure neutrality and to respond to allegations or information indicating that the principles may have been breached. Two, to ascertain how those mechanisms and procedures have or have not been implemented in practice, and whether every practicable effort has been made to apply them to their full potential, taking into account the particular operational, political, and security environment in which UNRWA operates. Third, to assess the adequacy of those mechanisms and procedures and whether they are fit for purpose, including in relation of management risks and taking into account the particular operational, political, and security context in which UNRWA works. And fourth, to make recommendations for the improvement and strengthening, if necessary, of the mechanisms and procedures that are currently in place, and for the creation of new and alternative mechanisms and procedures that would be a better fit for purpose, taking into account, obviously, the operational political environment in which UNRWA operates. The Secretary General notes that these accusations come at a time that UNRWA, the largest UN organization in the region, is working under extremely challenging conditions to deliver life-saving assistance to close to 2 million men, women, and children in Gaza Strip, who depend on that aid for their survival amidst one of the largest and most complex humanitarian crises in the world. This independent external review will take place in parallel with an investigation currently underway by the UN Office of Internal Oversight Services, OIOS, which is looking into the allegations of involvement of 12 UNRWA personnel in the October 7th attack. The cooperation of the Israeli authorities who made these allegations will be critical to the success of the investigation. And all of that was circulated with you. I also have an update on Sigrid Kaag's activity, our Senior Humanitarian and Reconstruction Coordinator for Gaza. She just concluded a visit to Cyprus, where she discussed a possible maritime corridor to Gaza. In Cyprus, she met with government counterparts, including President Nikos Christodoulidis and Foreign Minister Konstantinos Kombos. She also visited the Larnaca airport as well as the seaport in Larnaca. Before Cyprus, the special coordinator was in the United Arab Emirates to discuss the humanitarian situation in Gaza. There she met with the foreign minister, Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan. She also met with the chairman of the Emirati Red Crescent Society, Sheikh Hamdan bin Zayed Al Nahyan, and also with the commander of the joint operations in the Ministry of Defense, Major General Saleh Al-Amiri. During Ms. Kaag's visit to the UAE, the government of the UAE generously pledged $5 million in support of the efforts to implement Security Council Resolution 2720 for civilians in Gaza, and we thank them for that. On the ground, from Gaza, our deputy humanitarian coordinator for the occupied Palestinian territory, Thomas White, said in a social media post this morning that an aid convoy waiting to move into northern Gaza was hit by gunfire, but adding that thankfully no one was injured. The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs continued to report heavy fighting throughout Gaza over the weekend. It cites reports of significant destruction to residential blocks across Gaza, particularly in Khan Yunis, this by Israeli forces. On the 2nd of February, the destruction of residential blocks was also reported in Al-Sabra neighborhood in Gaza City and also in parts of southern and eastern Khan Yunis. On the 3rd, a residential block was reportedly destroyed in central Khan Yunis. The health sector remains extremely precarious, with only 13 out of 36 hospitals being functional in Gaza, only partially. And as of that's as of last week, according to the World Health Organization. For the month of January as a whole, only 10 of the 61 humanitarian aid missions planned for the north of Wadi Gaza were facilitated by the Israeli authorities. That's 16%. 2 were only partially facilitated. 34 missions, that's about 56% of them, were denied access, and 6 were postponed by aid organizations due to internal operational issues. Facilitated missions primarily involve food distribution, while the access of missions to support critical hospitals and facilities providing water, sanitation, and hygiene services remains largely denied. Also just to say that our Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, arrived in Rabat, Morocco. She held meetings with senior government officials, including the Moroccan Minister of Foreign Affairs, Nasser Bourita. They also discussed the challenges faced by middle-income countries, and the Deputy Secretary General reiterated our commitment to supporting the country's ongoing efforts towards sustainable development. On Tuesday, she is expected to address the opening session of the ministerial segment of the high-level ministerial conference on middle-income countries. Also want to flag on the Security Council this morning, Khaled Kyari, the Assistant Secretary General for the Middle East, Asia, and the Pacific of the Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, briefed the Security Council on Myanmar. That was done in a private meeting. This afternoon at 4 p.m., Council members will reconvene for a meeting on threats to international peace and security. Rosemary DiCarlo, the head of that department, will circulate those remarks. Just turning to Chile, I'm sure you've all seen the news of the devastating fires, which have especially impacted the Valparaiso region. The Secretary General said today that during his visit to Chile in November, he saw firsthand the generosity of its people, and he offered his condolences to the families and loved ones of the victims of these horrific fires. He also expressed the solidarity of the UN with the people and government of Chile at this difficult time. And on the ground, our team there, led by the resident coordinator, Maria Jose Torres Macho, is boosting preparedness to support the national response to the wildfires in Chile. Our team is preparing non-food items and assistance for post-disaster coordination challenges and is ready to assist the government with any support it needs and we can offer. Turning to Yemen, the Special Envoy for Yemen, Hans Grunberg, met with the Foreign Minister of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Hossein Amir Abdullahian, and other officials and diplomats. That took place in Tehran this weekend. Mr. Grunberg stressed the need to safeguard the progress made towards a nationwide ceasefire, measures to improve Yemenis' living conditions, and the resumption of a Yemeni-owned political process under the auspices of the United Nations. He explored with the Iranian officials ways to maintain a conducive environment for continued constructive dialogue in Yemen, including through sustained concerted regional and international support for the UN-led peace mediation. Discussions also focused on the need to de-escalate tensions at the regional level and to prevent a relapse of the cycle of violence that plagued Yemen until the UN brokered truce in 2022. And turning to Abyei, which has been the site of violence recently, that I can tell you that over the past 3 days, in an area located along South Sudan's border with Sudan, we and our humanitarian partners have been providing food and shelter materials to displaced men, women, and children, despite major access and logistical challenges. The UN interim force in Abyei, our UN peacekeeping force, confirmed that a fresh outbreak of attacks in the southern part of Abyei over the weekend resulted in a number of civilian deaths and injuries, kidnappings, and the burning of villages, as well as the theft of cattle. The fighting has displaced more than 2,200 people. Our peacekeepers have been sheltering the displaced in United Nations bases. Among the displaced are hundreds of children, pregnant women, the elderly, and people with disabilities. Humanitarian teams continue to carry out assessments in villages impacted by those hostilities. A health team also carried out medical consultations. The peacekeeping force has intensified patrols by land and air to deter further violence and to do whatever it can to protect civilians. The mission urges the immediate cessation of hostilities, respect for international humanitarian law, and of course the protection of civilians. And just north to Sudan, but rather in relation to Sudan, but I want to flag an event that's taking place on Wednesday in Geneva at our headquarters there. We will be launching this year's humanitarian refugee response plan for Sudan that aims to reach about 15 million people inside the country this year. Both Martin Griffiths, our head of humanitarian affairs, and Filippo Grandi, the head of the UN Refugee Agency, will participate in the event. After nearly 10 months, more than half of 10 months of this current conflict, more than half of Sudan's population, that's 25 million people, need humanitarian assistance and protection. The current round of hostilities also forced more than 1.5 million people to flee across Sudan's borders to countries already hosting large refugee population. The regional refugee response plan looks to support nearly 2.7 million people in 5 neighboring countries. That's the Central African Republic, Chad, Egypt, Ethiopia, and of course, South Sudan. And you will have seen over the weekend, we issued a statement in which the Secretary General said he was deeply saddened by the passing of the president of Namibia, Dr. Genegob. Dr. Genegob was a respected and principled statesman who dedicated his life to serving and developing his country, a prominent anti-apartheid activist, pioneer of Africa's green energy transformation. He became first the Prime Minister of Namibia in 1990, President in 2015. The Secretary General sends his condolences to his family and the government and people of Namibia. Not yet. Not yet. Exactly. 2 more member states on the honor roll. One is in the heart of Europe, and the other one is an island nation on the fringes of the Caribbean. This is going to be easy. Paprika prominently features in the cuisine of the first country. Hungary, yes, it's not that complicated. In the heart of Europe, paprika, okay? I could mention goulash too, but we thank our friends in Budapest. And second, flying fish, often paired with a side of cuckoo, is a favorite of this island nation. Barbados. All right, who said Hungary first? I think you did. So go ahead if you have a question. Otherwise, you can yield.
On Senegal, there's been some unrest during the weekend due to the postponement of the elections. Any comment?
We've obviously been following very closely the situation in Senegal. For the Secretary General, it's very important that all stakeholders uphold a peaceful environment, refrain from violence and any action that can undermine the democratic process and stability in Senegal, and to speedily resolve differences through consensus, and especially, I would say, in line with Senegal's long-standing tradition of democratic governance. Edie, and then Pam.
Thank you, Steph. 2 questions. First, Is there any timetable for the OIOS inquiry report? And I'm asking because I saw some times in some publications, like 4 months.
I cannot give you a time frame because obviously the investigators will do whatever they need to do. From our standpoint, we would like to be done as speedily and as efficiently and credibly as possible. We don't want to box them in to a time frame, but I think 4 months is way too long. I haven't seen that mentioned anywhere.
Okay, and secondly, President Putin is going to visit Turkey, and one of the issues, according to the Turkish foreign minister, is to discuss a new Black Sea grain export idea proposal for Ukraine. Does the UN know anything about this? Is the UN involved in
We're
this?
not involved, as far as I know, in this bilateral visit, but obviously we will be looking closely as to what comes out. Pam, then Deji, then Ibtisam, then Ephraim.
Thanks, Steph. On the a few quick questions on the UNRWA investigations. One is there had been some sense that it could be 4 weeks on the OIOS, and are they in any way coordinating these two?
So
Okay.
they're two different. I mean, they're two distinctive things, and that's why we tried to make it as clear as possible in the announcement this morning. OIOS is looking at the specific cases of the 12 that was mentioned. It is the kind of investigations that OIOS routinely does, looking into the behavior of staff members. They will need the cooperation of everyone, all member states involved. The independent review group, led by Catherine Colonna, working with the 3 research organizations, is a much different mandate, and I think we've listed it pretty clearly.
Okay. On that, do you expect other people other than the 3 organizations to be appointed on the Colonna?
No, not that I've been made aware of.
Okay, and the next one is, will there be testimony or information that comes from the parties to the conflict, Israel and the Palestinian Authority, to either of those?
Well, OIOS will speak to whoever they need to speak to do their work as they usually do. Obviously, the independent the review group will speak to member states and to whomever they need to speak to, which obviously will include the Palestinian Authority, will include Israel, will include others, but they are not. They will do whatever, Madame Colonna will do whatever, and the 3 research institutes will do whatever they need to do to fulfill their mandate. They are working independently from us. We put, I think on the email we sent you, we put a press contact, so you should reach out to them.
Okay,
yeah, go ahead.
Final piece is just, will either of the investigations deal with what I believe the SG said, but it certainly came out of your office, that there might be a prosecution of those who are involved?
So, the one led by Catherine Colonna, the review group, I mean, I would encourage you to read through those 4 bullet points. It's very clear what their mandate is. OIOS, like looking into any alleged potential misbehavior by UN staff anywhere in the world, if there is anything that needs to be transmitted for further action, they will do that.
But to who?
Let's wait for the investigation to end. Deji, please.
Okay, my questions contains in 3 parts. The first part is a follow-up. I just try to keep all the questions short. If I listened correctly, there will be a midterm report in March, and then in April you will have a public report by this
That's correct.
group. But you said that maybe by the end of February, the UNRWA would be running out of funding.
That's correct.
But how do you expect that the donors would resume donations
Well,
to
we
UNRWA?
hope that donors have taken clear notice of the swift action taken by the Secretary General, taken by the Commissioner General to address head-on issues that may exist. We will continue to communicate with donors. The Secretary General has been very forthcoming with them. The Commissioner General, I have no doubt, will continue to do that as well. We also encourage other member states who may not have given to UNRWA in the past or had given in the past but have not given recently and have the ability to do so, to show generosity and to show solidarity.
Okay, so the second part, on the retaliation attack by the U.S. In Syria and Iraq, we saw both Syrian government and some of the officials in Iraq condemn or at least showed concern on this retaliation. Does the UN Secretary General believe this is a violation of the territory integrity and the sovereignty?
I mean, we are very concerned about the risk of escalation in the region as a whole. I think we have seen kinetic activity in large parts of the region over the weekend, and our call is for de-escalation and to avoid of any further steps that make things worse.
Is it a violation?
I've answered the question to the best of my ability.
Okay, so my third part. 2 weeks ago, you said that the financial status of the UN is not that good. How would the financial status affect UN's ability of dealing with all those things? And would, let's say, the United States pay some of their dues would make a difference?
I think we've been very clear on the importance of member states paying dues here. We quiz you on it every day. We also understand that different member states have different calendars, had different internal issues that they need to deal with. But there is a commitment, right? There's a binding commitment to pay assessed contributions. We hope that all member states live up to that commitment. The Secretary General has done his utmost to ensure that despite the financial challenges that we face, that our basic work remains, right? And so the fact that we have lowered the temperature in this building in the winter is a way to save money without impacting our work.
So this is not in relation with what the budget committee did. Like the budget, they passed the budget.
Which budget committee?
I mean, not budget committee, but the GA. They usually pass the budget of the next year.
Yeah, they passed the budget. Yeah.
So yeah, but
it's not a budget issue; it's a liquidity issue.
So how's the liquidity then?
The liquidity is not good.
How's the cash flow?
It's not good, and I think the liquidity is not good, and it's challenging. Ibtisam.
First, I have a question regarding the independent review group. You have actually, or I think Mr. Lazzarini on January the 17th announced that they are going to appoint such group. My question here is, what were why that announcement back then? Because the allegation of the Israelis of having UNRWA staff came rather later.
Because I mean, Ibtisam, I think we all follow the news, right? And allegations, accusations, innuendos, direct attacks on UNRWA have been going on for quite some time, right? And so I think that was what Mr. Lazzarini his thinking, as far as I understand it, back in January, was like, okay, well let's do a review and let's look at our risks and if our mechanisms, could we do things better? Could we strengthen? There's accusations that we're not being impartial. All of that's listed, and that was his thinking, and this is what we have now.
Okay, I have another follow-up on the statement you read regarding, at the end, the Secretary General says that in context of the internal investigation, he says that you need the cooperation of the Israeli authorities. So my question here, are they cooperating? And did you get this dossier? So
Listen, I've not heard there's been any change in terms of UNRWA getting more information in writing. What contacts OIOS may be having with Israeli authorities or others, I'm not privy to, and it's not my job to ask them while the investigation is going on.
Okay, I have a last question. The American ambassador on Friday criticized the Algerian mission and the draft resolution that they are putting for a ceasefire in Gaza. I know I assume you're not going to comment on...
Assume away.
Yeah. So my question here is, given the fact that we have already 2 resolutions, and these 2 resolutions regarding Gaza, these 2 resolutions you have been saying, and other UN officials have been saying that it's not possible to implement them without a ceasefire. My question here is, would a resolution that very clearly talks about pauses or, let's say, a humanitarian ceasefire be helpful for you in order to carry out your mandate?
I mean, the weekend hasn't changed our mind on the need for a humanitarian ceasefire. Our position remains the same.
And you need a resolution for that?
Well, any strong unified message from the Security Council on any issue is helpful. But we need a humanitarian ceasefire and as quickly as possible. Ephraim, and then Yvonne.
Hi, Steph. My main question has been asked, but I have a follow-up also because the statement from the Secretary General still mentions the 12 UNRWA people accused. This amid reports that the Israeli intelligence has revised the number down to 6. Have you looked further into this? Because that means 6 people have been fired unfairly or unjustified.
All of that is going to be looked at by OIOS. Yvonne, and then Amélie, and then the German guy, because he came late.
Thanks. With regard to the food convoy that was struck this morning, have you got any more details? What happened to the convoy? Did any of it manage to carry on? Or
No,
has
I
all
don't
been
think it
destroyed,
did
or?
not. I mean, let me just put it this way. What I saw was the photo posted by Mr. White, which clearly show a destroyed truck. Any more details I would ask you to ask. We can put you in touch with our colleagues at UNRWA.
Okay. Can I ask about Myanmar as well?
You may.
This morning, we heard from the envoy from Myanmar who said that it was high time the Security Council took this matter seriously and took action accordingly. What's the Secretary General's view on that?
Well, I mean, I think if you'll remember, the Secretary General had sent a letter. The Secretary had sent a letter to the Security Council at the beginning of his term. I mean, not in the beginning of his term, more than 3 years ago, on the situation in Myanmar. He continues to be very well focused on it. And again, I sound like a broken record because maybe I am one. But unity and unity of action and messaging from the Security Council on all of these issues where millions of lives are at risk is important. Madame.
You just a follow-up on UNRWA funding. You said you hope that the donors noticed what has been done to address the issues. Did you get any kind of signal from the major donors that have suspended their contribution that they would reverse their decision?
Not just yet that I'm aware of. No, hold on, Edie, I'll come back to you. I may do a first round, then I will come back.
Yeah, the
to you. I
German
don't-
guy will ask you about El Salvador.
Yes.
Mr. President Bukele won in a landslide. I wonder if you have a reaction to this.
We've taken note of what happened in El Salvador over the weekend, including the elections, and we are aware also that the votes are still being counted, and I will leave it at that for now.
And my second one, the OIOS investigation, do you plan to release any of the information when the investigation is done?
I think we will share whatever information we're able to share without prejudicing whatever processes may have to be underway at that time. So I can't speak to that at this point.
But you say you will not release nothing. Because you did that in the past with other.
Yeah, I've
cases.
doubled 9 and 9. I commit to nothing. How about that? All right, let's go to the screen. I see somebody with a hand up, but I can't read the name. Okay. Alejandro, you have a question, and then Abdelhamid.
Yes, thank you, Steph. We haven't talked in a bit on the situation in Ecuador. I wonder if there's any update from the SG on the situation in Ecuador.
Yes, I think obviously the Secretary General is very much aware of what is going on in Ecuador and is keeping an eye on it. He remains very much concerned about the threats posed by organized crime to the national institutions in Ecuador and their impact on the daily lives of men, women, and children in Ecuador. He welcomes the progress made in the reduction of homicides that have been reported in January by the authorities in Ecuador. And he recalls that efforts to halt the wave of violence in Ecuador must comply with international law and should meet Ecuador's long-standing and long-lasting commitment to the rule of law. Abdelhamid.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stéphane. I have a few questions too. First, I will start with the article written by Thomas Friedman during the weekend, and in which he talked about the Middle East as an animal kingdom. He said also about Iran that it's like a wasp in a wood, and to get rid of the wasp, you need to burn the wood. Do you have any comment on that?
No, I'm not commenting on every article editorial that is being written. But your next question, sir.
My next question today, Israeli army killed a boy near East Jerusalem, that bringing the number of people killed since October 7 to 381, wounding 4,400, and arresting over 6,500. So it's another genocidal war going in the West Bank. Do you have any comment?
We have expressed our concern extremely publicly as well as privately at the ongoing violence in the West Bank, in which Palestinian civilians are paying the highest price. I expect this to be also part of the briefing that we will hear from the Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, Tor Venesland, who will be here on Wednesday. And he will then speak to you either from this podium here or at the stakeout. This has been confirmed and promised to me. And I have no doubt.
My last question.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Okay, talking about investigation, in 2014, UN schools were attacked, 13 UN staff were killed. The UN investigated that and found Israel accomplice and put the responsibility on Israel and asked for compensation. Now, in this confrontation, 152 staff killed, so many schools, so many UN facilities. Is the UN investigating what happened to the UN property and UN?
As I've said, I think numerous times when this issue has been brought up, is that once this conflict has stopped in a way that would allow us to investigate, I do very much expect a board of inquiries from the UN side. Let me still go to round one. Please go ahead, Chinu.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up. My question has been asked, actually. Iran-backed group killed 6 Kurdish soldiers yesterday in Syria. Seems like Kurdistan regions have been a battleground for some international forces, especially for Iran. Any comment on that?
You know, as I said, we're concerned about this escalation that we're seeing and the risk of further escalation given strikes in Syria, in Iraq, along the Red Sea, in Yemen. All of this is very volatile. Edie, and then we have our guest who's patiently waiting, and I have to go see her. Or you have to go see her.
Thank you, Steph. Going back to the issue of new donations for UNRWA, last week after the Secretary General met the Prime Minister of Qatar, you talked about positive humanitarian developments. Does that mean we may be expecting some kind of a new donation from Qatar for UNRWA?
I think, as in every humanitarian situation, we confirm cash when the check has been cashed, but hope springs eternal.
Second thing.
Yeah.
You said that Commissioner General Lazzarini called for this independent inquiry in January. I do not recall hearing about it until after the allegations were made by Israel against the UNRWA people. I don't recall hearing.
Yeah, he made that call publicly. You could check with UNRWA exactly where and where. Yeah. Pam, and then we have to go.
Just a quick follow-up, just on granularity of Ibtisam's question. Has the Secretary General received his own copy of the dossier from the Israeli
There's
government?
been no change to what I've been saying about this.
So they have not received?
No change.
Thank you.
Thank you. And please, we have our guest coming up. Thank you.